Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting, fun-filled episode of your favorite aquarium podcast, Tank Talk Podcast. John from KG Tropicals here with the great Jason from Primetime Aquatics. And Jason, got a topic today that I thought of, yesterday, because I filmed a video of a very similar topic for the KG Tropicals channel. And the reason why I filmed that video was because I get a lot of emails from customers to our website, which, shameless plug, is keepfishkeeping.com. We sell a lot of filters, whether it's hang-on back filters, internal canisters, Shark Pros, Shark Pro Nanos. We were selling canister filters, but they cost too much money to ship, and so we don't have those now, but we also have sponge filters. We got all the filters. And because of that, we have to handle customer service. We get a lot of emails about those filters, all different types of problems. And most of those problems are very, very easy to resolve. And so I'm like, you know what? That's a perfect podcast episode to kind of go through the common problems that are found in aquarium filters, give people the ways to resolve them. And I know I just went off script because usually I have you or you have me say what the topic is. Sorry about that. I'm not professional on Fridays, I guess.
You know what? It's our first recording of the day, so that's what happens. But yeah, we are going to be talking about the common issues that you can face with the different types of fish tank filters out there. I mean, we've got, like you said, we've got so many sponge filters, hang on back, internal, external canister filters. I don't know if we're going to be talking about under gravel filters. There's really nothing to say about them. But, you know, with all the other common filters that are out there, yeah, things happen. And we're going to talk about what happens, how to deal with it.
If this episode gets 10,000 views, first of all, that'd be great. But maybe 4 of those would be people that have under gravel filters. So, no, we're not going to waste any time on those. I mean... You know,
and we're going to hear about probably it now in the comments. I have under gravel filters. They're the best filter in the world. Now, you can think that you can use them totally fine. There's not much to say about them in this particular video.
No, certainly not. Now, we've discussed this before, but I'm going to ask you again, and we're going to start fresh as if it's something we've never talked about before. What do you think is not the most common problem, but what do you think is the most common filter? I don't mean brand or anything, but the most common type of filter in the hobby.
Oh, I think without a doubt, it's got to be the hang-on back filter. When you think about the people just starting out, all the kit tanks, the vast majority of them, if they're not like the tiny little nano all-in-ones, if it's a kit tank from a 10-gallon, usually up to a 55, they're coming stocked with the hang-on back filter. You go to the stores, the shelf space at your Petco's and your PetSmarts, the vast majority of that is hang-on back filters as well.
I would completely 100% agree, which is why I, again, did that video on the KG Tropicals channel, because we sell so many of them. I'm not trying to flex or anything like that, but we sell more hang-on-the-back filters by far than anything else. And so with good reason. They're easy. They're convenient. I mean, they just sit there on the back of the tank, and they're extremely efficient. So it makes sense, particularly for beginners, that this is the best filter option out there. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe they're not the best option, but for most people, they're going to be the easiest, most convenient option. What is the number one or the most common problem that people are going to run into with hang on the backs, which actually is going to apply to pretty much all of them that we're going to talk about, but specifically hang on the backs? What's the main problem that people complain about?
So from my perspective, and I don't know if it's right, because again, you've probably got more interaction with customers, but probably just not starting, especially after breaking it down, doing some maintenance, doing a water change in a tank, just them not restarting.
That's true. Or to kind of piggyback on that, just dying altogether, just stopping working. I don't care what brand it is or how expensive it was, just stopping working. And out of nowhere, all of a sudden now your water's completely stagnant. The fish are up at the top gasping for air. What would be, I'm quizzing you here today, Professor. That's how it's going to work. What is without a doubt that it's 100% of the time. Well, no, I guess it can't be 100%. But what is your absolute go-to when somebody comes to you? And I realize they come to me more because I sell them, but I want to see if your answer is the same as mine. What would be when somebody says to you, my hang on the back filter isn't working, or any filter, I guess with the exception of sponge filters, it just stopped working. It's just dead. I got to throw this thing away. What would be the first thing you would tell them to check?
I would definitely tell them, and what we do, because we've got a number of hang on back filters in our fish room, number one thing that we do is, well, why don't you go ahead and check the impeller? Because that needs to spin in order to suck water up. If that has stopped, there can be a number of reasons why it has stopped, and each filter is going to have sometimes a different main cause, but for the most part, it's get that motor out. If it's Aqua Clear, just unattach it from the back, or if it's a Seachem, you can access it, or the Marineland Pros, you can access those as well. The impeller has probably stopped, because if it was going, you wouldn't have that issue. You at least hear it and start doing the maintenance there.
This is why I love doing podcasts with you, because we think so alike. And you know what? I don't think that is a matter of opinion. I think it's factual. I mean, when hang on the back filters or any power filter, it could even be the internal canisters, whatever, they all have impellers in them, and those impellers stop. Again, doesn't matter who made it. It's just, it is what it is. I very rudely disappeared off screen for a second because I went to grab this. I am not even going to say what this is, because I don't want this to become an advertisement, but I happen to have this sitting here because of the video that I just recorded to be able to demonstrate what that is. It may surprise you, Jason, that people email me all the time. I mean, because we've sold something like 5,000 hang on the back filters. We get people all the time email with exactly this scenario. It just stopped, and they don't know what an impeller is. Why should they know? They're not an engineer. They're not a mechanic. Like, why should they know? And so I have to explain to them, okay, we need to access the pump. We need to open it up. This is why I made that video, so that I could actually refer them to that video. But I wanted to demonstrate here or show what an impeller is. It is the little fan with this particular filter, which I will not name. It's the CJ Aquafiltra. That red little fan there, that is the impeller, and it spins in here. I don't need to go into the mechanics behind it, because if I'm being honest, I don't even really know the mechanics behind it. I just know it is a magnet, and there is the reverse polarization or whatever is on the opposite side of the motor, and when power is put to it, it makes that magnet spin in there. And so you have this moving part in the filter that if something, a ram's horn snail, for example, or a grain of sand or a little piece of gravel, even some of your harder foods or something like that, might be able to get up in there and stop that from spinning. These are not gear-driven monster devices that'll just grind up stuff. They're very fragile, delicate little magnets that something pretty slight can actually stop it from spinning. And so all we need to do as fish keepers is free it from that, and that'll restart everything. It is the simplest thing ever. And I'm not going to exaggerate here. I'm telling you the truth. It's 95% of those emails that I get. I haven't documented them. I'm just telling you by feel. 95% of those are solved by just simply cleaning the impeller off. And it doesn't even need to be taking a pressure washer. You pull it out, blow it off, maybe rinse it in the sink, clean out the chamber in there, put it back together again. Doesn't require any tools. Automatically starts running again. It's a beautiful thing. Definitely the main culprit for poor performance, because a grain of sand or a ram's horn snail or a bladder snail doesn't have to necessarily stop it from spinning, but it might slow it down. So the performance slows down, or it just stops completely. 95% of the time, that's going to be the culprit.
Yeah, absolutely. And each brand will have its own struggles with the impeller. So for instance, the Marineland Pro series, that one sometimes is not fixable, because if you because it has an internal motor, it's sitting in the tank. We've had this happen where the boys would drain a tank, forget to shut that thing down. It's still running out of the water. It gets very, very hot. That casing swells. That filter is done. There's nothing you can do about it. It's done at that point. The aqua clears. So the thing with the aqua clears, I don't know if I haven't really checked close enough on the new AC series, but on the old ones, you're going to be really careful with those impellers because that plastic after a while gets pretty brittle. And so if you're having a hard time pulling the thing out of there, sometimes I'll use needle nose pliers just to kind of, so I'm not using my big bulky fingers and I'm just kind of gently pull that thing out, but those will crack.
Yep.
Believe it or not, they still will work, even if it has 3 fins instead of 4. The C-chems out of the ones that we're the tidal line, those can be some of the more challenging ones to get to compared to like the aqua clears or the Marineland Pro. The other problem too is if you try to get to that impeller, you have to take that intake off, that cover, and then getting it back on can be a little bit of a pain sometimes. So it can be a pain, but it's better than throwing a filter away and just buying a new one. Just take it, service it, and it usually works.
I'll tell you a funny, this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but it worked. Speaking of aqua clears, the old style of aqua clear, we had a bunch of them in our fish room back in 2011. And when we had them that the impellers would stop, I would literally pull the intake tube off and take a butter knife or something and just stick it down there and just give it a little push.
Yeah. And give it a little, yep.
It would start it right back up again. And it would work every single time. Yep. I don't recommend doing it that way. But that's what I did
that a million times, or like a little wire or something, or a stick, something that can get up there. We'll talk about this later, but one of the most useful things we have in the fish room are these really long, skinny nails. And that's one of those where you can just do that, just kind of give it a little flick and it just starts right up again. But there's other reasons for having those around too. But yeah, that's funny.
It's an easy fix. It's not one that I would absolutely recommend, but you know what? Hey, if you're pressed for time, you just need to get it back running real quick. I would make the argument that if there is something in there, like a grain of sand or something like that, and it's grinding that piece of sand, you could be damaging the magnet part of the impeller, which could lead to poor performance. It could lead to noises. And that's one of the things that we didn't really mention here. This is not just my filter stopped working thing. It could be that your filter's making a horrible noise. The exact same thing would be causing that horrible noise. That fan's spinning and it's hitting something. Whatever it is that it's hitting, even a massive buildup of algae or something in there could cause that. So impeller issues are a thing, and there's no way to get around it. Every single power filter has one, and every single power filter will eventually have some kind of an issue with the impeller. The only thing I want to add to it a little further is in the video that I recorded, I showed on all 3 of the filters that we carry, which is technically only 2 at the moment, but we will be carrying that Aquafiltra. The C-Chem is by far, once you get it taken apart, the easiest to remove, because the impeller's just sitting there. You just grab it and pull it out. Whereas with the aqua clears and the Ciche, you do need something, like you said, needle nose pliers or maybe tweezers, or I just use my pocket knife, stick it in there and pry it out. It's not difficult. It's not a big deal, but the C-Chem, that fan is just sitting there and you just pull it right out. But you do have to go through multiple steps to get to it. Whereas with the aqua clear and with the Ciche, they're just right there, they're easy to access. But, if you're having problems with your power filter, obviously the very first thing you should check would be your power source. Make sure it has power. And once you establish that it does, the impeller, it's going to fix 95% of the problems that you would have with hang on the backs, or any power filter for that matter. So what's next? I'm putting you on the spot here because I have a list. I don't think you do, but
I don't have a list, but I've had a lot of hang-on back filters. For me, the next one that I find could actually be the most catastrophic is when you lose that leveling device in the back of your hang-on back filter. Those things, I don't care what brand it is. I've had them fall off the Aqua Clears, the C-Chem Titles. they sometimes they just fall off. And then what happens is it's designed so that your hang on back filter is level so that when it's sucking water and it's not tilted. So behind the
Hmm.
tank, if you lose that and it starts tilting backwards, well, now if it's sucking in water and your media starts getting clogged, it's not going out the front anymore. It's going out the back. Ask me how I know, because I have had, and I just mentioned this in a video for my prime timers, I have had every brand, Seachem, AquaClear, Marineland, put water on the floor at one point, because
Mm.
you use hang on backs long enough, those things for over time, they will eventually become not level. And it just takes a couple extra days too long of not maintaining your filter media. And next thing you know, you're like, wow, there's 2 inches of water missing out of the top of my tank. Where did it go?
Yep. Yeah, that's true. I have used scraps of cardboard, fold it up, jam it back in there to level it up. Everything you just said, I've experienced myself. And, I don't think that if everything is optimized, the media's clean and everything, the filter's fully functioning, it'll operate perfectly fine like that. But like you said, the second that filter starts to resist water flowing through it, the media, all of a sudden you're creating a waterfall out of the back. I too have had that. That's probably the easiest problem to fix out of all of these. Just level the daggone filter and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about it anymore. But yeah, the little tabs on this particular filter, it's just a little knob
Mm-hmm.
that goes on the filter that adjusts the space between it. They can't, if you're adjusting them all the time, they can wear off and fall out, and you won't know it until you say, why is there water on the floor?
Yeah.
That's a big problem. So don't mess with those. Just set it and forget it, and then you should be fine. But if you're somebody that's taking it off the tank all the time and all of that, it's like you said, it doesn't matter what brand it is. It's only a matter of time. It's going to wear out eventually, and you too will be folding up pieces of cardboard to stick back there.
Yeah.
Uh, my next thing that I wanted to talk about, you've kind of already addressed. We just did, and that is clogged media.
Yeah.
I get so aggravated with people that complain about bypass in hang on the back filters. It doesn't matter what brand it is. They complain that the water doesn't go through the media, it bypasses the media. Well, why is it not going through that media?
Because
It's
it's
a question to
clogged.
you.
Yeah,
That's
because
right.
it's dirty. That's the whole point. It is a safety mechanism so you don't have water on the floor. The filter's going to run the water through the media, and then when it can't, when there's an obstruction, it's like, okay, well, we've got this safety bypass. That's what it is. It's a safety feature so that you don't wind up with a flooded room, and it's just going to bypass that. And I, just like you, I've gotten a million comments on videos, especially with the Seachem tidal line, even
Yep.
though there are easy ways to fix that. Oh, it runs through the bypass all the time. Well, yeah, but you've got media in there that's catching a lot of gunk. And if sometimes maintaining a filter once a week is not going to be enough. Your filter is telling you that. Your filter is saying, hey, I'm catching a lot of garbage here. And you've got a tank that maybe is heavily stocked, or it's catching a lot of uneaten fish food, and it's clogging up every 2 or 3 days. Well, I don't want to clean the filter every 2 or 3 days. Well, I don't know what to tell you, because you have a filter that is doing its job. It's just not, you can't just ignore it. Right. So,
Right.
yeah, it's going to either run a bypass, or the same thing is it's just running slowly. Right. So it's not the bypass. Like, man, this, especially the old marine lands, right? The penguins and stuff, those filters would basically just come to a drip.
Yep.
And it's just because the media was clogged and everything would slow down and the flow would slow. So if you've got slow flow, usually it's because the media is just saturated.
Yeah. I mean, this exactly what we're talking about here is one of the reasons why I love replaceable cartridges on filters, but I also hate them because when you're talking about the smaller filters and stuff like that, the foam on them, on the replaceable cartridges, is very thin. It doesn't take long at all to get clogged up. And so, yes, it's very convenient to be able to just swap it out and it's no big deal. But I tell people, don't swap it out every week. Take it to your sink, rinse it off.
Yeah.
Use the dreaded tap water to not hose it off, but rinse it off. And, you should be fine. All you're needing to do is release all of the debris that's in there to allow water to flow through it. Like you said, I love that you said it. Sometimes you can notice it just trickling. It's not that flow, that big waterfall that you're used to. Well, that's the exact same thing. It's not getting through there. That's also something that's very common with filters that have pre-filters.
Yes, just going to say that too. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, because that's picking up everything and the filter just isn't being able to bring in any water to it. And so everything dramatically slows down. Both of those are very, very simple issues to fix. Clean your daggone media. That's the answer every time.
People ask me all the time why I don't use pre-filters on my hang-on backs, and it's for that exact reason. Unless you've got shrimp, mystery snails, because sometimes their bodies can get sucked into, especially the aqua clears can get sucked into the holes of the intake, or you're just breeding small fish. I will never use an intake sponge because I find it to be far more trouble than it's worth, because now those things are a pain. If you compare that to just clean the media and the hang-on back filter, you got to go in there, you got to get in there, and then it releases all kinds of stuff back into the water. That thing is getting clogged up easily every couple days, as opposed to the rest of the media, which doesn't. So it's like you can make an argument, well, you can clean that, and then your filter media stays relatively clean. That's fine, but it's easier just to clean the stuff in the hang-on back. Again, if you've got snails, shrimp, you're breeding fish, hang-on back, the intake sponge is awesome. But outside of that, I want nothing to do with those things.
I can remember, and maybe it's just because I wasn't looking, but I can remember a day where the pre-filters, they just didn't exist. The intake sponges, they just weren't a thing. And so it was very common to see, you can still see the comments on some of the older videos, like, well, what do I do with fry or with, shrimp or whatever? How do I stop them from going in there? So for that, those intake sponges are brilliant and they're amazing. But, I have an aqua clear in a heavily planted tank right now, and I run it with the pre-filter, or I keep calling it pre-filter, the intake sponge. I run that on there simply because I was testing it out to see if it was a product that I wanted to carry on the website or not. And there's a lot of duckweed in that tank. There's a lot of hair algae in that tank because, it is what it is. And so that intake sponge clogs in 2 days. And just seeing a little trickle come out of the tank. It's a huge thing. But I do have shrimp in there. I have snails in there. I have things that I don't want getting sucked up into that filter and getting ground up by the impeller that we just talked about. So I do keep it on there, but it's something that I have to clean out regularly. It dirties up the whole tank when I have to clean it out. And, it is what it is, but it works great until it doesn't. Right. then it actually causes more problems than it's worth. So
yeah,
I'm going to move on to my next thing. If you don't have one,
do it.
What about DIYers being too aggressive and being their own worst enemy when it comes to the performance of their hang on the back filters? And what I mean by that is they're under the belief that more media is better and more biomedia, more filter floss, more this, more that. And they pack it in there so tight that it makes the filter basically useless, makes it so that water can't even flow through there. That is another thing that is probably more common than it should be.
Yeah. And most of it's pointless, like you already said. So let's just take an aqua clear or the Seachem Tidal. They usually come with a sponge. All I do with those filters is I use the sponge that was provided. I might throw a couple layers of filter floss. That's it, done. I don't use the biomedia or the Purigen or any of that stuff because I've never needed it. And I've made an argument for a million years that you don't need that biomedia in any filter for any reason, because the sponge, the filter floss, and the surfaces inside your aquarium and inside your canister filter is more than enough to deal with the microbes that you need in order to accomplish the nitrification process. And so you can have it. It doesn't hurt anything. And certainly the chemical media If you want to put carbon in there or the Purigen, that's fine. It's not hurting anything. It could be beneficial. However, if you're going to be packing that thing so tightly that you're restricting flow like you're talking about, or running the risk of overflowing something, it's totally unnecessary. Again, I could take any tank that we have, and as heavily as we've stocked some of our aquariums for quarantine, with just the sponge that came with the filter, a couple layers of filter floss, that's it. That's all I needed. No ammonia spikes, no nitrite, nothing. Really good mechanical filtration, and the water still flows just fine.
Yeah, and in particular, the title in the AquaClears, the sponge is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, particularly on the AquaClear. I mean, that
yeah.
sponge that comes with it is absolutely massive. Gives you all that you need. Now, I am a user of carbon and Purigen and things like that. In fact, I'm due to put some in this tank behind me to kind of get rid of that yellow look that it's got going on. I choose either Purigen or Max Out. I love Max Out from Fritz. Those are products that work extremely well for that. But, they have a lifespan that, they work for a certain amount of time, and then you got to end up replacing them. And I haven't really had any problems with those, the chemical media type stuff, but I've certainly had biomedia get clogged up with a bunch of detritus and a bunch of nasty brown. And next thing you know, it's basically not serving any purpose whatsoever. And just to piggyback on what you said, if you have an aquarium that's functioning properly, your fish are happy, everything's going great, adding more biomedia to that tank is going to change nothing. So it is a complete waste of money in that situation. And all you're doing is introducing something that can clog up even more. I also think that people underestimate how quickly filter floss can clog up. Whether you're using polyfill or, pillow stuffing, whatever it is, it's basically the same thing. That stuff clogs up really, really fast, and you're left with it just bypassing it altogether. So clogged media for sure. I mean, it's got to be one of the biggest. And a lot of times it is either a lack of maintenance or it's people just trying to jam too much stuff in there, and you're packing it in there so tight that it's just not letting the water flow through it. You're actually causing the problem thinking that you're doing the right thing. So what I have next probably should have been the first thing. Even more important than impellers. And I think this is very common. Not having an appropriately sized filter to handle the stock that's in your tank. You might have a 55-gallon tank and you put a Tidal 55 on there, or a AC 50, maybe the AC 70, or a Penguin 350, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But your tank is stocked so heavy that it needs more than that. And you're thinking, why is my tank brown and have all this disgustingness floating around in it, like the one behind me? Why is it doing that when I have the filter is the right size on there? Probably a scenario where even if it's tetras, it's not only African cichlids that we need to double up on our filtration. We need to have a filter that's appropriately sized to the stock in the tank, not necessarily the gallons that are in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So there's three types of filtration. There's biological, there's mechanical, and there's chemical. And when it comes to chemical, that's the Purigen, that's the activated carbon. If you want to use it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But when it comes to the size of your filter relative to the tank and the stocking, on the biological side, I have maintained and will continue to maintain there isn't a single tank back here. I got 125-gallon, two 125s back there. I could run those 125s with a fully cycled Hydro 5 sponge filter. That is it. That's all I would need. I would never have an ammonia or nitrite spike ever. However, those tanks would look horrible because really when we're looking at the size of the filter relative to the tank and the stocking, it's all about mechanical filtration because the biological is going to be handled. And for that, well, That's why I've got the two Oaza 850s on the 125, and I've got Fluval 407s on the 75. I know a lot of people run the FX4s on the 75 gallons because for that, we're wanting to trap as much junk in the water column as we can to get that crystal clear look. And for that case, yeah, that Tidal 55 on a 55 gallon, one of them, it's not going to cut it because that's a 4-foot tank. You've got a filter probably on one side or the other, and the other side's going to look horrible. That's just the way it is. On a 6-foot tank, you're not just throwing, oh, I've got a 6-foot tank. I'm going to put the largest hang on back filter I can possibly imagine right in the center. That's fine. But know that you're going to have poor water flow on either side of that 125, and it's going to look bad.
Yeah, and it's the circle of this hobby, the circle of life of this hobby that we have, because we put a big filter on there, but we fill it with a whole bunch of fish. They create a lot of waste, which clogs up the media, which makes the filter useless. So we have to go in there and we have to do maintenance. We are, again, our own worst enemies. Your better bet is to over filter. Now, there are scenarios, plenty of scenarios. I could use the tank behind you right there, that 50-gallon low boy. You could probably run a Tidal 55 on that and be perfectly fine because you have light stocking in there. You got a lot of plants in there. At least from what I can see, it's lightly stocked. You'd probably be fine. I'm not saying that a Tidal 55 is not an adequate filter for a 55-gallon tank. What I'm saying is us as fish keepers, we never settle for what we should do. We're always pushing the limits, and we're always going to put more fish in there than we probably should. We're going to have a lot of plants in there that are, leaves are falling off and they're going into the filter media and all this stuff. And it's just too much for that one filter to handle. So adding, whether it's a sponge filter to the other side or a canister, an internal canister or something else to help compensate for that extra stock in there is going to be a make or break thing. We're always pushing the limits. I mean, I'm certainly doing it now, and I struggle every single day with this tank, even though I have more filtration on that tank than any other tank in the United States of America. I still struggle with it because of the load that I have in there. There might only be, I think, 7 fish in there, but it's enough to always be struggling to keep up with it. So, having the filter that's appropriately sized to the stock, not the tank size, it kind of goes back to our episode about not all gallons are created equal. The one where you said Guns N' Roses was hair metal, but that episode hasn't uploaded yet.
They've lost all their hair, but now it's just big belly metal or something like that.
That episode uploads actually after we are recording this now, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what the audience says about that one.
Too.
But yeah, I don't know if you have any other common issues. We're only 35 minutes in, and
not with the hang on back, but there's certainly common issues with the other types of filters, like for instance the sponge filter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's people are always told, hey, you know what? With the sponge filters, this is supposed to be super easy. Just hook it up to an air pump, throw it in the tank, and you're good. Right? It's supposed to be the simplest of all filters. We always hear that, right? That is not true at all, because a sponge filter, just like we talked about the hang on back filter, you don't clean the sponge filters, they will stop running. And I mean, they just stop. You'll see like, wow, I used to have a bunch of bubbles coming out the top. Now it's like one bubble every 3 minutes. That's because that bad boy is completely clogged and totally useless right now. So you do have to clean those.
Yeah, and I don't care what anybody says, it is impossible to clean a sponge filter without clouding up the water. It just happens. Yeah, you can wrap a bag around it and you can do all of that, but you're still going to get some gnarliness in the tank when you clean it out. It's just part of the deal. That even happens when you clean a hang on the back filter. So wait a couple hours, it clears up and it's no problem. How many times have you been in? I've been into a lot of fish stores that filter all of their tanks with sponge filters. How many times have you been into one where the sponge is just completely collapsed?
Yeah.
Because it's so clogged that it's sucking as hard as it can, and it's just made it all misshapen and look weird. Yeah.
Yep.
They're not maintaining those.
That, and I mentioned earlier, and I'm trying to look for one. I don't think it's on our desk right here, but I said I keep a long, skinny nail in the fish room. And the reason we do that is even if you keep a sponge filter, like the filter media clean, the sponge clean, that part where the hose connects, that eyelet there, inevitably will clog. So
Hmm.
it's a guarantee that at some point that's going to clog. And we just take a nice little skinny nail and just poke it right through, clears out all the detritus, and that thing will go from, wow, it was barely running to, holy cow, I got to turn the air down. So
Hmm.
it's really important that you not just maintain that sponge filter itself, but that little eyelet there, that where the hose connects, you sometimes have to unclog that as well. And we will notice that right away. Eli will go through, he'll clean the filters. If it's not running after he's cleaned it, he knows he's got to unclog those air hose connections.
Yeah, sponge filters, they are easy, they are efficient, they do work. You'll never get me to say they're the best filtration on the planet. No way. They're the best in certain circumstances
Mhm.
where you got a bank of 25 tanks and you want to filter all of them. Yeah, that's the best scenario for that. But they do work. I've seen so many tanks that just look horrible that have sponge filters in them. That's not necessarily the fault of the filter itself. It's the fault of the fish keeper. We definitely want to keep them cleared up. And I am, and I know you are too. I'm particularly a fan of the fine foam sponge
Mhm.
filters.
Yeah.
They are great. They pick up everything, but they also do seize up a lot faster
Yeah.
because the pores are so small in there. So, yeah, keeping those squeezed out. The good thing about it is very easy to do. Yeah, it's going to clog up your water, but taking them, the controversy that Primetime Aquatics started, take them to your sinks, squeeze them out, you're good. Rinse them off in tap water. You're
Yeah.
only doing it for a few seconds. It should be fine. Um, I remember hearing you say that for the first time, and I was like, oh, he's going to get some flack for that.
And
But
I
I
did.
knew.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
knew you were right. I mean, I did it too, but
Yeah.
I
Almost
knew there
all
was some.
experienced fish keepers knew that that was perfectly safe to do. And the other thing too is there are some things with sponge filters you cannot just fix unless you replace them. Inevitably, with a sponge filter, basically it is the internal part. You've got two plastic pieces that kind of connect together in the center. Those are going to get dry and brittle. They just are. And after a while, especially if you're maintaining them properly, we maintain our sponge filters every week. You're constantly taking them apart, putting them back together. They
Yep.
will eventually, at some point, when you try to put them back together again, they're not going to fit tightly and the top's going to keep coming off. So the sponge filters are not always a just set it and forget it thing. They do. We get about 4 or 5 years out of a sponge filter. Now they're cheap, so they're not super expensive to replace, but that's about it. That's all we get out of them before either the sponge itself starts to break down or that piece in the center just won't hold. And now your sponge filter is floating at the top of your tank.
Yeah, for sure. You're dealing with a lot of fish and a lot of load, and so I mean, even getting 4 or 5 years out of them, I think you're doing pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
I think your average fish keeper with a normally stocked tank that's not cycling hundreds of fish in and out like you've been doing with yours, you might be able to get a little more time out of that. But again, if you're maintaining them right, and like you said, you're constantly taking them apart and putting them back together again, squeezing out those filters, the sponges, I mean, they can wear out pretty quick. If you get 4 or 5 years out of any aquarium filter, power or not, or sponge filter, you should be good. That should
Yeah.
be fine. I've had filters last me 10 years. I've got filters in here that I have right now that I've had since 2012, and they still work.
Yeah.
So you should be able to get plenty of time out of them. But if you get 4 or 5 years, that's about right. You
Yeah.
should be fine there.
Yeah.
Um,
And the other thing with the sponge filter too is the air hose. A lot of people don't realize that those air hoses will get dry and brittle. The part that's actually exposed to water constantly. When you first put an air hose in, it's got a lot of flex to it. It's really easy. But after a few years, that thing will get dry and brittle and it will come disconnected. And then your air hose is floating at the top of your tank. Your sponge filter is just sitting there doing nothing. So you do have to replace that air hose every few years as well. That's super cheap. I mean, you can buy that stuff in bulk. You're literally looking at, when you cut out a piece, 15 cents, but it
right.
does need to be replaced sometimes.
Do you find, and I know my answer to this, but do you find you know how some of the airline is very rigid while others are very limp. What do you call it? Very,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
flexible.
yeah.
Do you find one being better than the other, one
Yes.
lasting longer than the other?
Yeah, the best one, and we've used a lot. I buy it in bulk online, but it's the Python branded air hose. So Python they're the same company that makes the water changing thing. They also make airline, and the
Hmm.
stuff is phenomenal. I mean, it's far better than any of the other airlines I've used that do wind up getting dry and brittle a lot sooner. So it still does. Again, it's still going to happen, but not nearly as fast as a lot of the other stuff I use. And we buy it in big, giant,
Big rolls.
like, yeah, big roll, because we have all these tanks. We had more. I mean, especially when we had this side as a fish room, we had 80 tanks. We were replacing that stuff quite a bit, but it's just nice. Have it on a roll. I don't remember what it costs, probably 30 or $40. And then for us, that's going to last 4 or 5 years at least, if not longer.
Yeah, I personally, I really like that airline, the Python. We actually used to sell that on our website. Um, we don't anymore, and it's not because of the product. It's because of where we buy our product from. Doesn't carry that, but I too found the Python to be really good. I like the hose that is more flexible.
Yeah.
The rigid stuff works just as well, but the more flexible stuff, it I don't know. There was times where the rigid stuff would actually make your sponge filter sit crooked because it's so
Mm-hmm.
rigid. It's all that's. I just don't even fool with that. Just use the nice, super soft, flexible. Limp probably isn't the right words to use, but it's kind of explains it pretty well. But so I don't know that there's more on sponge filters unless you do. I think it's time to move on to canister filters, which should
Yeah.
actually be super easy.
Yeah. And some of it we've talked about already, right? I mean, again, for me, the canister filter, the number one thing is keeping the media
Mm-hmm.
properly maintained, because that is, with all these tanks behind me here, when I start to see that water flow going down, or the tanks are just not looking as crystal clear as they normally do, that is the sign, hey man, your filter media is saturated with garbage. Go in there and deal with it. It's especially an issue with the Oazas. Not that it's a bad thing, but they have a pre-filter on there, which is super convenient. But that pre-filter catches everything. And so every couple of
Mm-hmm.
weeks I'm going in there just rinsing out that pre-filter, but then the rest of the media stays basically spotless. So it's catching all that gunk. That's the number one thing. If you have a canister filter, you notice your tank's not looking that great, or the flow has been decreased, open that bad boy up and clean it.
Jason's least favorite thing in the world to do, cleaning out canister filters. I don't disagree. It is a pain in the butt, but it is. I've noticed the most dramatic evidence that you need to do maintenance on your filter is from canister filters.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's like all of a sudden, it's almost like the filter's doing nothing. And because these filters are so powerful, particularly when you're dealing with the fluvals and the ones that are just mega filtration. They're so powerful. They're moving so much water that they're picking up everything, and that's good. That's what we want it to do. But it also clogs that media up really, really fast, and when that happens, you're cooked. And I have found, particularly like with the FX series, how you have the exterior. I don't know if it's the right thing to call it, but the donut of sponges that goes around each tray, but then the center column has all your biomedia and your fine filter pads and stuff like that in there. It's that center area that gets clogged up faster than the outside ring. That's what I've found anyway.
Okay.
It's not that I only clean those and I don't clean the other one. No, with the FX series, I pull everything out and clean all of it, but it seems like that's where the bulk of it is. And I actually stopped using the fine filter pads in FX filters because they just clogged up way too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And you would just see it. It was almost like the water was sitting in there stagnant. Like, is this filter even doing anything? It's because that one pancake pad is clogged up. You free it up and that thing just starts screaming like anything else. So the reason why I was saying canister filters is going to be easy to cover is because, well, it's everything we've already said. It's the exact same thing as with hang on the backs.
Although there's one other thing that's unique to canister filters, and I want your opinion on it because I don't have enough. I don't have enough experience with them like I do other types of filters. The leaking canister filter. What say you? When somebody says, hey, man, I've got this canister filter, it's a year or two old, and now it's putting water, it's just dripping. It's not like crazy, but something's wrong. What's going on there?
It's tough because, like we've said, when the filter media is clogging up really fast, you're going to be taking this thing apart. You're going to be taking that lid off a lot to get in there and clean that media out. And there, again, speaking specifically about the FX series, there is an O-ring that seals the joint between the bucket and the lid, and you have 18 little knobs that you have to tighten up around. It's not 18, but it's probably 10 little knobs that you have to turn around that hurt your fingers, and it's terrible if they're not all seated properly and they're not all tightened down properly, and that O-ring starts to wear out. Yeah, guess what? It's going to happen. It's going to start leaking. Personally, never had it happen to me, but I don't know if that's because I've got strong fingers and I get it down there real tight. I don't know, but I know that it happens. I know that it is a common complaint. And that's the same thing with every canister filter that's ever been made. It's going to have that joint between the lid and the main body of the filter. That O-ring gets out of whack or gets some sand in it or something like that, you're asking for it.
Yeah. How often would you recommend replacing that O-ring? Or do you even need to? Do you have an extra one on hand? Is it something that, it's just be ready for it?
I feel like that's one of those things. If you, like for me, I don't have them. I don't have any extras because I'm in a fish room. I got concrete floors. If I start getting a little teeny leak, I can order one and have it here in no time. Or actually, I would probably just take one off of one of the filters that I'm not running at the moment. Put some Vaseline on there, get it nice and soft again, put it in there, probably be fine. But if I had one in my living room, I probably would keep one on hand. They're not expensive at all. They're easy to get. I probably would. As far as how much time, that's really hard to say because like I said, I've never had one give way on me. Maybe that means I don't clean my filters enough, but I've never had one fail on me. I know it happens, but I've never had the need like, oh my God, I got to replace one in an emergency situation. But if you want to play it safe, maybe replace it once a year. I don't know. That might even be way overkill. What do you think?
I've never had to replace them. So again, okay. I don't have a ton of experience with the canister filters because before the gallery back here, I did have at one point a Sun canister filter, which I highly don't recommend for the low boy here. And that sucker, man, there was nothing I could do to keep that thing from leaking. And so I would strongly recommend if you're considering canister filters, go with a top tier, which I would consider to be the Fluval, all their canister filters, whether it's the 07 series or their FX. The Oazes, I think, are in that tier. I haven't used the Eheims, but I think they have a decent reputation. I don't know. I mean, you probably could speak more to that than I can.
I had this is me just being brutally honest. When we had our store, I sold one Eheim canister filter, which I I ordered specifically for a customer from our distributor. He brought it back 2 weeks later because he couldn't stop it from leaking.
Okay.
That is the only experience I have with an Eheim canister filter.
Yeah. So for me, it's just, I'm sticking with Fluval or Oaza. And I don't know if there's other brands out there that you recommend besides those for the external canister filters.
I use some CJ Wales in here right now. They work fantastic. I do have two FX2s running and two FX4s. So I am a monster fan of the FX series. The CJ Wales are great. I don't know that there's a canister filter that I hate, to be honest. I've never tried a Sun. That Eheim might have been user error. I'm not going to sit here and disparage Eheim. I'm just saying that's the only experience I have with one, and it wasn't even my experience, it was a customer's experience. Every canister I've used, Aquariums, I've used the Marine Lands, and they've all been fine for me. You just have to be aware that you're taking water out of your aquarium, taking it somewhere else, processing it, and sending it back. Whenever you're doing that, you have the potential for leaks. Be aware of it. But my personal experience, I haven't had leaking problems. I've just been lucky, I guess.
Yeah.
But I also, and I don't know if we have time, maybe I'll share it if we're needing to fill dead air with this episode. I've also said for years now that I've never had an aquarium leak. Well, I did recently. So, I probably just doomed myself. I've got like 8 canister filters running in here. Probably bound to have a problem now that I've said that, but I haven't had any real issues with them leaking.
Yeah, and that's I mean, because you always hear the horror stories like, oh my gosh, this thing just, or something disconnects. That's always my biggest fear, is the return somehow just falling off, and then this canister filter is just sucking however many hundreds of gallons an hour, and then pretty soon you come back to your 6-foot tank, your 125, your 150, and like, yeah, it's got about 3 inches of water, and that intake really just spit that water all over the room. That's awesome. Or the return.
Yep.
So
especially with those FX.
I double check those connections on the returns, because that's the one thing that would be horrible.
Yeah, and that's the only thing with the FX series. Like, you have to disconnect those hoses. I do like the filters that have like that quick disconnect, like the CJs do, where you disconnect both the input and the output. It's one connection. It's not that I dislike the way the Fluvels do it, but you have to disconnect those two. You can't do that without water getting, it's going to escape when you do that. You have to do it in the right sequence, otherwise it'll siphon, and then you have a huge problem. I do like the ones that have the quick disconnect. The Marine Lands have that. The Aquarium, I believe, has that. The CJs have it. It's very cool where both of them pull off.
And the Fluval has that too on the 07 series. So I've got the 2 407s. Right. They have the quick disconnect. Owaza has that. Well, Owaza also has the pre-filter, which is awesome, because then you don't really, in theory, if your canister filter is outside the tank and not under the stand, you don't even have to mess with that part of it. You can just switch the lever over and just take the pre-filter out. Yeah,
that's pretty smart. I've never had an Owaza, however you say it. I've never had one of their canisters. I've heard really, really good things about them, though. Mainly from you, but I've heard it from other people too.
They don't push the water through the way that the Fluvels do, but the other parts of them and just the trays and the way that they build them out, they're pretty good.
Yeah, the go-to for the big tanks for me has just always been that FX series. And I mean, and I started out with an FX6, which was the first one that or I guess the 5 was out before that, but the real big monsters was the first ones that they were doing. And then they introduced the FX4 and the FX2. I've got all 3, and I've always loved those. I think that when we're talking about the big canisters, yeah, they clog up pretty quick because they do such a good job, but there's just no comparing them yet. CJ's coming, and we'll see with their new mega filter that they're bringing out. But as of now, I don't think there's been any competition for the FX. But that's just my experience. I am a little biased because I'm a Fluval fanboy.
So here's a question for you, and this I don't have an answer. We've talked about hanging backs, sponge filters. We're ignoring under gravel filters, and rightfully so. We've talked about external canisters. What about the internal canister? Like, are there things that because especially with how many you've sold on the Sharks and the Shark Pro Nano, are there things that you've seen other than just clogged media and people, because those things clog really fast if you've got a dirty tank? I mean, they are, like, in my opinion, they might very well be right up there with the external canister filter, if not even a little better for their size, right? The amount of stuff that they suck out of a water column is mind-blowing.
It's true. They're almost like a water polisher. If the water is dirty, stick it in there, and before you know it, it's going to clear it off. It can do too good of a job to where it clogs up, not because it's a bad filter, but because it's picking up so much that it clogs up pretty quick. No, I don't know any issues that are specific to internal canisters, whether they be the CJs or any other brands. All of the problems with them are exactly the same as any other filter. If your media is clogged up, it's not going to be as efficient. The water's just going to trickle out. with the canisters, with the internal canisters, it's not as obvious because they're under the water.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're hang on the back, most people have a little bit of a fault, like a little waterfall kind of a thing going on. So if your water's just trickling, you can notice it as soon as you walk by. Whereas with the canisters being completely submerged, the internal canisters, you're not going to notice that. It's not as glaringly obvious.
Right.
But, you know, to remedy the issue is no different than any other filter. It's very, very simple. And the nice thing with those and any internal canisters is that they're super easy to maintain. Just pop the cartridges right out, do whatever you want to do, whether it's replacing media or just cleaning them out. Super simple. The impeller is on the bottom, just like on the hang on the backs. They will have impeller issues just like anything else. Yeah, the issues that they would have are identical to hang on the backs or external canisters.
Yeah. And again, I think they are unique in the sense of how much stuff they pull out, because I remember I had a 40 breeder. I was quarantining. I don't remember. I think it was like 50 smaller geophagus. It was pool filter sand. And the tank itself had maybe a couple plants in there at the time. It was a lake tank, and you can set up. I had removed the rocks, converted the tank to a quarantine tank, but there was a decent amount of stuff trapped on the top layers of the sand. Well, you throw 50 geophagus in there for quarantine, and now they're turning all that stuff up in the water. You could barely see the fish. I'm like, what am I going to do? So I threw one of those Shark Pros in there. And what was crazy is it didn't just clear up the water, but as those fish were stirring up stuff from the substrate, it was sucking all that in too. And so not only was the water crystal clear, now the substrate was spotless as well. And I was like, this is nuts. I couldn't believe what it had done. You would never, ever in a million years see that from a hang on back filter. Never. I don't care what hang on back filter you're using. That would not happen. But that thing, it literally made that tank spotless. It was crazy.
It's the reason why it's one of my favorite products. I absolutely love those things. I love them to use in place of where we back in the day would use power heads. And why are you going to waste the time using a power head? Just put that up there, and now you got extra filtration too. It's absolutely one of my favorite products, and I love that. And I'm really glad that you brought up that scenario with the geos, because I don't want to end this episode without saying sand substrates are filter killers. Mm-hmm. I don't care what brand it is. I don't care if it's the $6 play sand from Walmart or pool filter sand or the high-end brands. I don't care. Sand is filter killers. So be aware of that. They are the number one thing that locks up impellers. It'll clog up your media. I would definitely say when you have sand substrates of any kind, raise your intake up a little bit. And if you have geos, maybe just have top overflows, because that's what they do. They rustle up that substrate. They're diggers. They're sand sifters. So they're going to do what they do, and they're just going to send that stuff right into the intake of your filter and wreak havoc. Yeah. I'm not saying never use sand. I'm just saying be aware that sand is absolutely filter killers. So
yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because when I'm testing filters long term, I always throw them on the 50-gallon low boy that's got the shell dwellers in there. And they're way worse than even geophagus, because they're constantly moving sand around them. But I want these filters to experience the worst in life. I want them to be on an overstock tank. I want them to be on a tank where they are barely sufficient for the volume. It's a 4-foot by 2-foot tank that's only 10 inches tall, but it's 50 gallons. And so right now I've got an AC50 on there, and it has been awesome. But I have killed a number of hang on back filters on that tank, some much faster than others, where you just realize this filter has got some issues. There was a couple on there. One of them I didn't even do a long-term review because I couldn't. The filter finally just died. But wow. The CChem titles have been awesome. The 35s on that tank. This Fluval AC50 has been great. But I've killed some filters that are supposed to be pretty decent, and I can tell you, not so much.
A lot of people complain that, and I kind of get it. I wish the Title 35 wasn't this way, but a lot of people complain that the Title 35 doesn't have a drop down intake.
Yeah.
But in that situation that you're talking about, or in low boys or 20 longs or something like that, I think it's absolutely ideal the way it is. And it's great that you don't have that opportunity to get stuff sucked up into it that you don't want to get sucked up into it.
Right.
But, a Tidal 35 on a super tall tank, I kind of wish it did have that drop down intake, but in certain circumstances, it's absolutely perfect for that.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
I don't have a whole lot more to add for filters, but I do feel like it's probably necessary that I elaborate a little bit about what I talked about earlier, because I brought it up and I said it could be a potential gap filler. We don't have a gap to fill, but I don't want to leave people hanging. So if you don't mind, if you don't have anything else to say about filters, my wife and I experienced something that we have not experienced ever in this hobby. Just last week, it was every fish keeper's worst nightmare. She came out to this fish house and sent me a picture, and the picture included just one word, and I can't say what that word is because I don't want to get age restricted. It was a bad one, the worst of the worst bad words. It was a picture of our 90-gallon aquarium that had about that much water in it. It was a tank that we had just moved like 2 weeks prior, maybe 3 weeks prior, and somehow that tank sprung a leak. And she walked into this fish house at the absolute last minute. It was like 10:30 in the morning when she came out here, and the water was already down there, and it was streaming out of this tank. I mean, if she had come out here 15 minutes later, the fish would have all been flopping on the substrate and maybe wouldn't have even been alive anymore. She found it just in time, and it still didn't make a difference. You and I talked about this before we pushed record. It was the weirdest thing. She immediately removed the fish out and put them into a bucket for safekeeping until we could get circumstances straightened out to put them in another tank. And they all ended up passing in that bucket, which is baffling to me. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that could have happened, but we thought they're going to be a lot better in there. At least they're in water. There was 16 or so fish in there. It was a lot of fish for a 5-gallon bucket, but they were only going to be in there for a little bit of time. And I guess the stress just got to them too far or too much. And they ended up perishing in that, which was absolutely devastating because we both loved those fish. As for the culprit for the leak, I have no idea, because I'll be honest, we were so upset and so frustrated that I put an Ultra Zero in there and drained the rest of the water out, used my shop vac to clean up all of the water, and we haven't touched it since. It was just so frustrating that it was like, I don't even know if I'm going to worry about trying to diagnose where did it come from. Should I reseal it? I might just throw the daggone thing away and start with something new. I don't know. But worst nightmare for sure.
Yeah, that absolutely stinks. There's never... Oh, it's one of the worst feelings when you got a bunch of water on the floor. You looked out, you mentioned that a lot of the water just went into a crawl space. But yeah. We've got the basement here, so it goes into, eventually drains into a floor drain. But I mean, there's still areas where there can be stagnant water under some of the tank stands. So you're getting under there with a shop vac and fans and everything, making sure that water, you get that water out as quickly as possible. But oh, what a pain! What a pain!
Yeah, it would have been a different scenario if it happened on this side of the building, but it happened on the other side where it's still wood floors with a crawl space underneath. And yeah, you alluded to it. There's a crack that the water just all went down into that crack and watered my crawl space pretty well. But so we did kind of dodge a bullet there, but the damage was done. I mean, it's wood floors, so they seem to have dried out really well, and I think we're going to be okay there, but it's a really old building, and it's terrifying of what it may have done. But it all flowed through really fast, and there wasn't even a whole lot of water on the floor when we came in here. It was like, where did it all go? Then I figured out that it went down into that crack. It probably would have done more damage if it had happened on this side. But because the water had somewhere to go over there, But the damage was done in that we lost the fish, and that was absolutely devastating. Beautiful breeding group of fluorescent peacocks. Fortunately, if there is a silver lining, we do have a lot of offspring from that colony, and we're going to be able to raise those up and still be able to enjoy them and start breeding those. So the project isn't dead, but those fish are, and that is a huge bummer. So I should never do what I did earlier in this episode and say, I've never experienced these bad things, because they tend to creep up on me after I brag about that. I'm sure I'm going to have a canister filter leak within the next couple days.
We'll be shooting the next podcast, and there'll be like water spraying up, hitting you in the back of the head. What is this? Is it raining? What's going on? Is the roof leaking? No, that's your canister filter shooting you in the back of the head from your 360 back there.
Yep, there you go, bragging again. You keep your mouth shut. This stuff won't happen.
Oh, man. Well, I think we definitely, hopefully, provided everybody with a little bit of what to look out for with these different filters. It's just one of those things. If you're keeping fish, you've got equipment, there are things you have to watch out for, maintenance that needs to be done, inspections that you have to have done every once in a while to make your equipment running and keep it running in top order. But as always, hey, thank you so much for being here. We're going to be back same time, same place next week. Have a great week, everyone.